Hi, I'm Jocelyn Riley, strength and conditioning coach and co-owner here at CrossFit BRIO. One of the things we love to do here at BRIO is work with youth athletes and teams. So today I'm going to take you through a bit of our philosophy on how we develop athletic ability in our youngsters. So the first thing we have here is the theoretical hierarchy of the development of an athlete. It's basically just a fancy way of saying a pyramid. So at the peak of athletic development, of course, we have sport, an athlete performing well in the skills and drills of their specific sport. Now, this is laid out as structural elements. So the supporting layer below performing well in our skills and drills of our specific sport is what we call weightlifting, which is just a catch-all term for the ability to control external objects, to be able to move ourselves through space and control something else. In CrossFit, we use all kinds of elements. We borrow from Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, some strongman elements, but basically anything where we have an external load falls into this layer. Now, before we can control external objects and perform well in our sport, the supporting layer below that would be what we call gymnastics, which is just a catch-all term for all of our body weight movements. Of course, we need to be able to have competency in moving ourselves through space before we can move objects and perform well in our sport. The supporting level below that is what we call metabolic conditioning, and that's the ability to take food and turn it into energy to support all of the levels above, moving ourselves around, moving objects around, and performing well in our sport. And then, of course, the foundational layer, the base upon which everything sits on, is nutrition. Nutrition is the inputs to the system that provide both the structural elements needed to build all the tissues, the muscles, the bones, the nerves, the skin, everything, and the energetic components, the things that we turn into fuel, turn into ATP in our metabolic conditioning so that we can move ourselves around, move objects around, and perform well in our sport. Now, CrossFit BRIO, we take care of the three middle layers with our CrossFit program, and at BRIO Plus Nutrition, we take care of the base. Then we hand off a well-fueled and a well-built athlete to the coaches to help them develop the specific skills and drills they need in their sport. Now, next up, we're going to talk about the adaptations we seek from exercise or training. There are 10 generally recognized physical skills: strength, stamina, flexibility, cardiorespiratory endurance, power and speed, accuracy, agility, coordination, and balance. And an athlete is as good as they are well balanced across all 10. And athletes have the most opportunity to improve by running headlong towards their weaknesses rather than continuing to hang around their strengths or the things that they're already pretty good at. Now, on this list, the first four, strength, stamina, flexibility, and cardiorespiratory endurance, these are physical adaptations, as in there's a measurable change in the tissue, and we achieve that through training. The last four, accuracy, agility, coordination, and balance, these are what are called neurological adaptations. The change happens in the brain, in a mind-muscle connection, but not in a way that we could measure it, in a way that we could take a tissue sample and look at it under a microscope. And these things we achieve through practice. And now power and speed in the middle, these are the essence of athleticism, because this is where our physical adaptations and our neurological adaptations come together for maximum speed and power. Now, with youth athletes, starting at around age 9 and continuing through to 12, 13, 14, whenever puberty kicks in, these are the prime neurological development years. This is when we learn the proper technique for how to move our bodies around and how to move external objects. So we really spend a lot of time practicing motor patterns, working on our balance, coordination, accuracy, and agility. And then the idea would be that if we move well and we have great technique at the point where puberty and that real anabolic growth phase fits in, then we can hammer strength movements and we can hammer the physical training adaptations because they've already spent so much time building the proper technique. So CrossFit is what we call a GPP program, as in general physical preparedness. Now, let me tell you how something that's meant to create a general base of athleticism works in a sport-specific environment. This is a story from World War II. The Allied planes, when they would come back, the engineers were analyzing where the planes had been hit. And they thought that if they reinforced those places where the planes were taking a hit, that would help their airplanes survive. And it was actually a mathematician from Hungary that pointed out that the places where the planes got hit and returned were the places where the planes could sustain damage. And they needed to think of it in the complete opposite way, in that the places where there were no bullet holes, those were the places where the planes got hit and didn't return. So those were the places that the planes needed to be reinforced. This works the same with our philosophy towards athletic training for athletes. What we don't need to do is train the motor patterns that athletes are already getting plentiful, sometimes dozens of hours a week of training, those motor patterns and positions when they come into the gym to do their strength and conditioning. We need to train the positions and motor patterns that they aren't spending a lot of time on. So think of a volleyball player already jumps hundreds, maybe thousands of times a week. When they come into the gym, they don't need to do more jumping. A hockey player already spends maybe dozens of hours a week in a single leg position, flexed hip, shoulders forward position. We don't need to spend more time on the dry land training doing single leg, partial range of motion movements. We need to get them in positions and movements that they aren't doing in their regular training. So at CrossFit, we spend a lot of time working on full range of motion air squats, learning to properly hinge and control maintaining neutral spine, what we call core strength. We get them to spend lots of time hanging. The goal is that athletes can complete a 2-minute bar hang for grip strength and shoulder health. So you'll see sometimes these sport specific programs where things seem very specific and sometimes very fancy, and you're like, ooh, this looks like very specialized. That's actually the complete opposite way that we need to be training our youth athletes. We need to get them back to basics, simple movements, squats, deadlifts, presses, running, jumping, control of neutral spine and full range of motion air squats, and the ability to jump and control their knees. Those are the basics that an athlete needs in order for them to perform well in their sport and also prevent injury. We know, for example, youth hockey players that can't hold a plank for 2 minutes on each side, as in balanced core strength on each side, are 87% more likely to get injured in the following season. So that's the CrossFit BRIO style approach to training youth athletes. I don't have to know anything about the specifics of the sport that they play, but I do know the human body, and I know the moves and positions that develop the best possible base to hand off to the specific coach that does have that knowledge so that we can work together to create the strongest, safest, highest performing athletes.